Well, hey there. It's Reverend Sully, Eric O'Sullivan, ordained on the internet. The caveat, as always, please do not burn your hands holding on to my hot takes. If you do, well, that's on you, pal or gal, or anywhere in the grand spectrum of humanity in which you reside and identify. Hello, how are you? Doing some comic book talk today. Enjoying some good cup of coffee as well. I am going to do an extended version of my Escapism Caveat. I feel that, maybe sometimes I crowd the top of my daily Comicbook Show with an info dump, or maybe too much bias, or because I definitely have a bias. We all have biases. This is human nature. Find me someone without a bias. I'd like to meet them and ask them questions. But really, I have something that I start off my 3 p.m. U.S. Eastern daily comic book show, the golden age of DC Comics, 365 days. I have this thing I call the Escapism Caveat in my show notes. I have notes. I use show notes. I do. And I'll just get into it. And then we'll elaborate just for a few minutes. But I notice it takes up maybe like 2 minutes plus of airtime, and a usually 10-minute show. So I just wanted to do something a bit more, centralized, that I could even use as a video link when the show ends. And the Escapism Caveat, and this is in Eric O'Sullivan's humble opinion. I'm a high school graduate. I flunked out of college my freshman year. I'm an autodidact. I'm a voracious reader. I love reading nonfiction. I love reading history. And so I'm pretty bright for a blue-collar union tradesman. All right? I am not an academic. And a lot of the problems on social media and what I'm going to get to with activists and activism are very academic, using academic jargon and points of privilege that come from having a college degree. Perhaps this is, as I said, this is an opinion, in my humble opinion. And I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're clobbering your problems and that you're not being clobbered by them. The Escapism Caveat. Activism is important. Activists are important. The world has needs. The world's in danger. The world's in trouble. And it needs help, and so do the living creatures, all of them. The trees, the fish, the kittens and puppies, and horses and cows, and the humans. All the humans. We're all in danger, yes. We live in strange times, but I think historically, you can always say that we've lived in strange times. Seriously. And but activism is very important. Activism is needed. Activism has its space and it has its place too. Yet recently, early in the 21st century, and for the past several years, activism. I've read a lot about postmodernism and how postmodernism was organized in its history and its genesis to where we are with it today. Starting off with Jean-Jacques Rousseau in the 1700s, leading all the way up to Derrida and Foucault in the 1960s, and the postmodern thought, leading from Marxism and its horrors of communism and socialism, but yet keeping facets of we're going to unionize the proletariat by standing up to the oppressor. It's got a lot to do with Marxism. That's his power base. So I see, and a lot of the past 30 years or so in colleges, I graduated high school in 1991, and our AP English teacher, Ms. Early, warned us about the advent of political correctness on college campuses. We were all college bound. We were. And we were stepping into this new world of PC. Now, over time, over the past 30 years, I this is my humble opinion, once again, that PC has morphed into what we call woke, capital W woke. And I don't even like using that word anymore, because I will correctly use its proper its proper definition: postmodernism, postmodernists, capital P, capital M, and yeah, I'll save the W word for people who want to get into Twitter fights. When you correctly identify it as postmodernism, people kind of like, maybe just take you seriously enough not to get into a scrap with you online or something. I don't know, but I don't engage postmodernists either. I'll get to that too. My escapism caveat. But activism is important. Activism is needed. It has its space. It has its place. But lately, in these past, since the early 21st century, within the past 30 years, and within definitely the past several years, in the past decade, activism has taken to a darker side. It has a very mean bullying spirit. I was bullied as a child. I know what a bully is. I was bullied as an adult. I know what a bully is. Bullies are needy people. Bullies will do anything to get their way. And activists are a lot like bullies. And also, I have an idea of it's an intellectual and cultural colonialism. I'm going to get to that too. But what's just as important as activism is escapism. Yes, escapism, the ability to leave behind the world's problems just for a few moments in a day. And that power that's in escapism is being eroded by activists who invade these spaces, using them as their platform. You know this word. To adjust their narrative. You know this word. To push whatever, it doesn't matter about their intention. It really doesn't. In my humble opinion, yeah. It matters that they've done it. They've come into our spaces. I was a Doctor Who fan. I was a Star Trek fan. I was a Star Wars fan. I was a Marvel Comics fan. I was a DC fan. You always get the well, what's wrong with all? There's nothing wrong with this. What's wrong with you? Exactly. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. These are such things already existed. It's the activists who came in and demanded the changes and then started labeling things as toxic. We have a joke. Well, it wasn't toxic until you guys got here. Pretty much. But escapism's needed. If you can be a space pirate, you can be a car driver, you can be lost in the game, you can be someone else in a different skin, a different gender, on a different planet, in a different time, and just leave this problem behind. And so the activist culture, which is academic and it comes from postmodernism, and which is kind of maybe even its own reformatting of Marxism, post-World War II by French people who saw the horrors of World War II and wanted to avoid things like that, yet keep the power of Marxism alive. Just change its trappings, but keep its soul. Well, that's just how I see it from my blue collar South Boston projects upbringing, second generation Irish Catholic, and being like a really geeky person. I grew up with comic books. I've grown up with science fiction, so I am a G1 fan. And when it comes to Star Wars, I'm a G2 fan when it comes to Star Trek. Probably third generation Doctor Who fan. The new fans have got to be a fourth generation, or maybe that's a second, third. You tell me in the comments about what generation of Doctor Who fan I would be. My doctor was Tom Baker in the mid-70s to the 80s when I was a kid, watching them on PBS on Channel 2, WGBH television, Boston. That was their segue bump music. All this activism that's been interjected into the fandoms, also video gaming, sports, churches, places. These are places, even like I would use escapism in church respectfully, because it's quasi-related, because it's not about, church isn't about the material world. Church is about your eternal soul and your deal with God and forgiveness and how to get into heaven. It's got, your actions on this material world matter, but the state of the material world, that's not the point. Now, to have good people doing good deeds and trying to do the best that they can, yes, but to actively say that people are toxic, people are racist, people are phobes or ists because they reject the constant appeal to the activists and the activists trying to transform our fandoms into their platform to disseminate their message. It's got nothing to do with our shared space and our continuity, the lore, the stories, our non-delusional parasocial relationships with our beloved characters. It's got nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with needy people wanting to exploit us as a resource. And I call it an intellectual and cultural colonialism. I'm going to wrap this up with this thought. What does that mean, Sully? Okay, I'm a history buff. I really am. I love history. And history is full of invaders, invading different spaces, different places to extend their control, to extend empire, and to get resources. And it's pretty simple. So I see the activists as the conquistadors. Think of our fandoms, or our churches, or our video gaming spaces, or our sports. Think of these as a tribe in a faraway land. Use your imagination. Escape for a second. And in this faraway land, we have a people, we have a culture, we have a vocabulary, we have a shared continuity, we have a shared expectation, we have a shared history, and we coexist, and we bicker, and we get along, and we keep moving forward. But yet here comes these invaders, these conquistadors, these activists. They have come into our tribe and our nation state with the intention of exploiting our resources and taking over. So they're going to insist that their way is the only way, that their religion is the only religion, and that the indigenous people, the pre-existing population of this space, of this tribe, if they're not with it, they're expendable, they're othered, they're some kind of savage. I'm just looking at this through history, through history's lens. That's my background today. It's some kind of fish. I like that. But yeah, that's how I see activists now. They're just conquistadors, trying to spread Christendom, their brand of it, and just trying to, take what they want, which is our resources. What's our resource as a fandom? Our outreach, our culture, us being something viable that touches people. And they're just, they're trying to change our hearts and minds, but they're trying to do it with really bullying tactics. And as I've said, activism has its space, activism has its place. Perhaps it could stay in its own lane. Why isn't that an option? Why can't, I can respect an activist, but does the activist respect us, the fans, the sports fans, the churchgoer? If we reject being used to come on, what does this have to do with Superman and tights and his X-ray vision? What does this have to do with Batman? What does this have to do with the Yankees versus the Red Sox? What does this have to do with going to church, bending a knee, and asking Christ for forgiveness? You know, seriously, I mean, when does it stop? Well, it stops when we stand up. When we stand up to bullies and unfortunately don't engage. I think it's what I see in postmodernists, you know, capital T theory people who come into pre-existing spaces, makes demands, demands change, and uses hostility as some kind of consequence. It's this is all based in postmodernism, and I have to reject postmodernism. It's redressed Marxism. It's not very American. You know, capitalism will evolve. It'll, you know, but America, as a, you know, it's where I live and where I'm coming from, has been deeply impacted by the postmodernists and by the postmodernists using, you know, activism. And yeah, I mean, comics, sports, video gaming, churches, you know, there is plenty of neutral ground in this world. We just have to reclaim it and just have to. It's very human to assert your boundaries and be like, you know what? Don't overstep yourself. Respect my boundaries. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with telling an activist to respect their boundaries. And especially if you have someone as important as AOC saying that, well, activists need to disrespect boundaries. No, because once your boundaries have been disrespected, and you complained about it, and it was this one-way street or something. I mean, there is a space, there is a place, and for escapism and for activism, I respect both equally. And yeah, that's my extended escapism caveat. Thank you very much for tuning in. Like and subscribe. I would love to earn your subscription. I make a daily comic book content where all this started. It's called the Golden Age of DC Comics 365. I used this beloved coffee table book given to me about 2 decades ago by one of my best friends for its intended purpose. It's a page-a-day book. I open to today's date. We look at some antediluvian comic book art. A lot of the times we can see how far we've come as a culture through the eyes of these old magazines and through this old form of entertainment. The Golden Age, yeah, and that's where the escapism caveat comes from, because I noticed the impact that activists have had on several of my beloved fan spaces, and I can't help but be concerned. And I remember the first time I was called a Nazi, and it hurt my feelings. Now I got some resilience, and it doesn't bother me anymore, because I know not to take these people seriously. Why? Because ultimately, postmodernists and activists, and a lot of progressive types, do not care how you feel and do not care what you think. If you are not their ally, you are othered. Very few and far between, you'll find some people that can have a conversation and that can give you respect and that can, you know, that they are out there. Hopefully they're your friends too. I've got lots of friends on both sides. But lately, the tone of the social media and the tone of our culture is an all or nothingism. It's allyship or enemy. I mean, once again, historically speaking, World War I in 1917 it ushered in a couple of new things with technology, with the impact, with global impact over armed conflict, but also something called total war. There was a concept. It was a new concept called total war, which led to something called total victory. Before World War I, the majority of wars were settled with treaties and negotiations. There would be a conflict over resources, land resources, money resources, people, cultural resources. Well, resource has a lot to do with conflict. but there were negotiated disputes. The disputes were negotiated with treaties, and a border would shift. Something would happen, but it would end amicably. And World War I was the first case of total war and total victory, where the Germans lost, and they lost financially, and the Ottomans lost, and there was no more Ottoman Empire, and the Austro-Hungarians lost, and there's this entire region between Russia, who had just developed into the Soviet Union, and Europe, like Eastern Europe, won this conflict. And totally, because there was total loss for the Germans, the Austro-Hungarians, and the Ottomans. And that's, historically speaking, once again, that's how social media is today. It's always about doubling down. There is no turning back, because that's a sign of weakness or something. There's total war in the culture war. That means it's looking for a total loser. That there will be no negotiated settlement here. And I see this almost with ridiculousness and apathy, but with sheer horror as well, that words are violence, words are weapons, and that culture is bad. I mean, I still believe that we live in the greatest society and the greatest nation at the greatest time, and these are the redressing of grievances, which is part of our Constitution, and I'm all for it, and I respect the activists, but I really wish it would go the other way, and I really wish we can find better negotiated settlements, and I really wish the middle will rise up and tell you both to shut up and behave, or you're not getting McDonald's. You know what I mean? Thank you so much for tuning in today. God bless. Namaste. Good luck. And we will see you again. Cheers. Bye-bye.